A homeless black woman walked into a store and asked, "Please, do you have any expired milk? I want it for my daughter." The Korean mafia boss was listening. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon at Milk and Moo. The hum of refrigerators, the soft chime of the door sensor, the clean smell of dairy products kept at perfect temperature. Then the glass door opened slowly, carefully, as if the person entering wasn't sure they belonged. A black woman stepped inside, her hand wrapped protectively around the small fingers of a little girl whose turquoise polka-dot dress was the brightest thing about her. The mother's navy puffy jacket was torn at the shoulder, stained with the evidence of too many nights outside. Her natural hair was tangled, uncombed, the kind of disheveled that comes from having no safe place to care for yourself. Dark circles carved deep shadows under her eyes, the kind that life burns into a person after months of fighting just to survive. They stopped in front of the refrigerated glass cases, filled with rows of fresh milk. Whole milk, 2%, skim, organic, lactose-free. Every kind imaginable, all gleaming under the bright LED lights, all far beyond what this woman could afford. The little girl looked up at the bottles with wide eyes. "Mama, can we get the strawberry one?" The mother's face tightened. She swallowed hard, her jaw clenching as she fought to keep her expression steady. She guided her daughter toward the counter where two young women in green aprons stood ready to help. Behind the counter, the first employee, a Caucasian woman with braided light brown hair and a warm smile, leaned forward. "Good afternoon. How can I help you today?" The homeless woman's voice came out as barely a whisper, so quiet that only a few people in the store could hear. "Please, do you have any expired milk? Anything you're going to throw away? My daughter, she hasn't had milk in 2 weeks. I just need something, anything." The employee's smile faltered. She glanced at her coworker, a woman with glasses and dark hair pulled back in a low ponytail, who shook her head slightly. Near the glass doors overlooking the city street, someone else heard every word with perfect clarity. Bong Cha-kang stood motionless in his tailored three-piece suit, his black silk shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal the edge of dark tattoos creeping up his neck. His posture was rigid, controlled, the stance of a man who had learned to command rooms through presence alone. He had been reviewing financial reports on his phone, waiting for his associate to return with the car. But now his attention was locked on the woman and child at the counter. He saw the way the little girl tried to make herself smaller, pulling her worn dress down to cover her knees. He saw the mother's hands trembling as she clutched her daughter's shoulder. He heard every desperate word cutting through the air like a knife. The second employee behind the counter sighed, her voice carrying an edge of impatience. "Ma'am, we don't carry expired products. Everything here is fresh. If you can't afford it, maybe try the food bank on 5th Street. The little girl's face fell. Her mother blinked rapidly, tears threatening to spill over, but she held them back through sheer force of will. "Okay, I'm sorry, we'll go." The mother turned, pulling her daughter toward the door, past the rows of milk they couldn't have, past the warmth they couldn't stay in. But then a sound stopped everyone. The scrape of expensive leather shoes on clean tile. Bong Cha-kang moved forward, his shadow falling across the mother and daughter like a storm cloud blocking out the sun. The employees behind the counter went rigid. They knew his face. Everyone in this neighborhood knew his face. The Korean triad leader who controlled half the city's underground operations. The man whose name made grown men disappear. The entire store fell silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to quiet. He stopped directly behind them, towering over the mother who was half his size, his presence filling the space with an electric tension that made the air feel thick. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low, steady, carrying the weight of absolute authority. The mother turned slowly, her eyes going wide with recognition, then filling with terror. She knew exactly who he was. She pulled her daughter closer, instinctively shielding the child with her body. But Bong Cha-kang didn't look at her. Instead, he lowered himself down, dropping to one knee so he was eye level with the little girl in the turquoise dress. His dark eyes, which had witnessed violence that would break most people, softened as they took in her worn shoes, her thin arms, her brave attempt at a smile. "Tell me something," he said gently, his accented English careful and measured. "What kind of milk does a queen drink?" The little girl blinked, confused. She looked up at her mother, then back at the intimidating man kneeling before her. "The strawberry kind?" she whispered. Bong Cha-kang stood, turning to face the employees behind the counter. When he spoke, his voice carried the tone of someone who had never been told no in his life. "I want 12 gallons of your best whole milk, 6 gallons of strawberry milk, every variety you have, 2 of each, and I want it delivered." The employee with braided hair stared, frozen. "Sir, that's going to be several $100s. Did I ask for a price?" His words cut through the air like a blade. "I gave you an order." The employee with glasses jumped into action, pulling out a notepad with shaking hands. "Yes, sir. Right away. Should we add anything else?" Bong Cha-kang's gaze swept over the store, taking in the shelves of products, the display cases of fresh items. He pointed methodically. "Eggs, 2 dozen. Bread, the fresh kind, not the packaged. Chicken. Whatever cuts are best for soup. Rice, 10 pounds. Vegetables, carrots, celery, onions. Whatever else is needed for proper meals." The employees scrambled, writing everything down, their movements frantic under the pressure of his presence. But Angela found her voice, panic breaking through her fear. "No, please, we don't need all that. We just wanted a little milk, something you'd throw away anyway. We can't accept this. We don't want any trouble." Bong Cha-kang's eyes moved to her, and the hardness in his face shifted slightly. He studied her for a long moment, taking in the exhaustion etched into every line of her face, the defensive hunch of her shoulders, the way she positioned herself between him and her daughter despite her obvious terror. "This is not charity," he said, his voice quieter now but still commanding. "This is tribute. Do you understand the difference?" Angela shook her head, confused and frightened. "Charity is what you give to someone you pity. Tribute is what you offer to someone you respect." He looked down at the little girl, who was staring up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. A mother who asks for expired food to feed her child while she herself goes hungry deserves respect. A daughter who wears her only dress with pride deserves respect. You are not beggars, you are survivors. The employees continued packing, filling bags with items that represented more money than Angela had seen in months. The employee with braided hair carefully selected the freshest products, her earlier dismissiveness replaced with careful attention to detail under Bong Cha-kang's watchful eye. He pulled out a black leather wallet thick with cash and placed 10 $100 bills on the counter without counting them. "Add fruit, apples, bananas, oranges, and chocolate. Every child should have chocolate." "Yes, sir," both employees answered in unison. Angela felt dizzy. The abundance unfolding before her eyes didn't make sense. Men like Bong Cha-kang didn't help people like her. They didn't kneel down to talk to children. They didn't speak about respect and tribute. There had to be a catch, a price she couldn't afford to pay, a debt that would strangle her later. But her daughter Nia was watching the growing pile of groceries with wonder. Real food, fresh food, milk that wasn't expired, chocolate. Things Angela hadn't been able to provide in so long she'd almost forgotten what hope felt like. The total came to over $700. Bong Cha-kang didn't even glance at the receipt when the employee slid it across the counter. He simply added 3 more $100 bills. "For the delivery, make sure it arrives within the hour." "Where should we deliver it to, sir?" the employee with glasses asked nervously. Bong Cha-kang looked at Angela, and something in his expression made her breath catch. That, he said, is what we are about to discuss. Bong Cha-kang gestured toward the glass doors, his movement controlled and deliberate. Walk with me outside. We'll talk where there are fewer ears. Angela's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to grab Nia and run, to disappear into the streets where she knew how to survive, where the rules made sense even if they were cruel. But her daughter's hand was warm in hers, and the pile of groceries on the counter represented more nutrition than Nia had seen in months. I don't know you, Angela said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand what you want from us. I want nothing, he replied. But I am offering something. There is a difference. The employees finished packing the last bag, 7 large packages of food that would require both arms to carry. Bong Cha-kang picked up 4 of them as if they weighed nothing, leaving 3 for the employees to handle. He nodded toward the door. Angela had no choice but to follow. She held Nia close as they stepped out into the afternoon sun, the cool air inside the store giving way to the warmth of the street. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered across the asphalt. A sleek black vehicle sat near the entrance, its engine idling softly. Bong Cha-kang placed the bags on the ground near the car and turned to face her. The sunlight caught the hard angles of his face, the tattoos that crept up his neck like dark vines, the expensive fabric of his suit that probably cost more than Angela had earned in a year when she still had a job. You think I want something from you, he said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. You think men like me don't help without expecting payment. Angela pulled Nia behind her, creating a barrier with her own body. I've lived on the streets long enough to know that nothing is free, especially not from powerful men. So tell me what you really want, and let us go. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. He looked away, his gaze moving to the distant buildings, the traffic moving past, anywhere but at Angela and her daughter. My mother died when I was 11 years old, he said, his voice flat, controlled. She starved to death while we were hiding from my father's enemies. Men who wanted to kill his entire family to send a message about loyalty and betrayal. Angela's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected vulnerability from a man whose reputation was built on fear. We lived in a basement for 4 months, Bong Cha-kang continued, still not looking at her. 1 room, no windows, water that came from a pipe we weren't sure was clean. My mother had saved some money, enough to buy food for both of us if we were careful. But she wasn't careful. She gave me her portions, told me she had already eaten, told me she wasn't hungry, told me children need food more than adults. His jaw tightened, the muscles working beneath his skin. I believed her because I was a child, and children believe their mothers. I ate while she grew thinner. I complained about being hungry while she was dying. By the time I understood what she was doing, it was too late. She died in that basement, weighing less than 80 pounds, having given me every scrap of food she could so that I would survive. The parking lot felt very quiet. Even the sound of traffic seemed distant, muted. I built my life on the foundation of her sacrifice, he said, his voice rougher now, catching on something that might have been grief. I became powerful so that I would never be hunted again, never be trapped, never watch someone I care about waste away from hunger. And for 20 years, I succeeded. I had everything: money, influence, fear, everything except the ability to undo what happened to her. He finally looked at Angela, and she saw something in his eyes that shocked her more than his words. Genuine anguish. The kind that doesn't fade with time, that lives in a person's chest like a stone they carry everywhere. 3 weeks ago, I saw you and your daughter at the park. I watched Nia play on the swings while you sat on a bench, pretending to read a book someone had left behind. I watched you give her the sandwich from the shelter and tell her you had already eaten. I watched her believe you, the same way I believed my mother. Angela felt tears burning behind her eyes. She had been so careful to hide their situation, to keep Nia from understanding how desperate things had become. I followed you after that, Bong Cha-kong said. Not to harm you, to understand. I watched you sleep in the alley behind the church on 7th Street. I watched you take Nia to the library every afternoon because it's warm and safe and she can read books there. I watched you go without food for 3 days straight while making sure she had something to eat every single day. Stop, Angela whispered. Please stop. You are my mother, he said, and his voice cracked completely, shattering the cold exterior he had maintained. Nia is me, and I cannot allow her to suffer the fate I suffered. I cannot watch another mother starve herself while her child eats, not when I have the power to stop it. Do you understand? This is not about you owing me anything. This is about me owing a debt to a woman who has been dead for 20 years. Nia peeked out from behind Angela's legs, looking up at the fearsome man who was suddenly not so fearsome anymore. His eyes were wet, though no tears had fallen. His hands, which had probably broken bones and ended lives, were clenched into fists at his sides, trembling slightly. I don't want to use you, he said quietly. I don't want to hurt you. I want to save you because I couldn't save her. I want Nia to grow up healthy and strong because I survived while my mother died. That is the price I'm asking. Let me do this. Let me be the person I wish had existed when my mother needed help. Angela felt something break open inside her chest. A wall she had built over months of rejection and cruelty, of closed doors and turned backs, of a world that had decided she and her daughter didn't matter. This man, this dangerous, powerful man, was offering her a chance, not because he pitied her, not because he wanted something from her, but because his own pain had taught him the value of intervention when it mattered most. She looked down at Nia, whose small hand clutched her jacket, whose eyes were bright with cautious hope. Then she looked back at Bong Cha-kong, whose entire being radiated the desperate need to make something right in a world full of wrongs. What exactly are you offering? Angela asked, her voice steadier now. Everything, he said simply. A place to live, food, safety, a chance for Nia to be a child instead of a survivor. All I ask is that you accept it. Angela's mind raced through every possible outcome, every trap that might be waiting, every string that could be attached to such an offer. Men didn't give things away for free. They didn't offer apartments and food and safety without expecting something in return. But as she looked at Bong Cha-kong's face, she saw only raw, unguarded pain, the kind that couldn't be faked, the kind that lived in a person's bones. Where would we go? She asked carefully, still holding Nia close. Bong Cha-kong pulled out his phone, scrolling through something quickly before making a call. He spoke in Korean, his tone shifting back to that commanding authority she had witnessed in the store. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds before he ended the call and looked back at her. I own a building in the Harbor District. 2-bedroom apartments, quiet neighborhood, secure. 1 unit has been vacant for 2 months. I'm having it prepared now. Angela's stomach twisted. The Harbor District. That was where people with money lived. Where the streets were clean and the buildings had security cameras and doormen. Not where homeless women belonged. I can't afford rent in the Harbor District, she said, the words coming out bitter. I can't afford rent anywhere. That's why we've been sleeping in an alley. You misunderstand, Bong Cha-kong said calmly. I'm not asking you to pay rent. The apartment is yours. 1 year, fully paid, utilities included. After that, we can discuss what comes next. Angela's legs felt weak. 1 year. 12 months of safety. 12 months of Nia sleeping in a real bed instead of on cardboard. 12 months of not wondering if they'd survive the winter. Why a year? She asked. Why not just give us money for a hotel room or help us find a shelter bed? Because shelter beds are temporary, hotel rooms end. I watched my mother die in temporary housing, always one day away from being thrown out, always terrified we'd be found. I will not offer you the same instability. You need time to heal, to recover, to find work if you choose, to let Nia be a child. A year gives you that. He made another call, this one shorter, just a few words in Korean followed by what sounded like an address. When he ended it, he looked at Angela with an expression that was almost pleading. My associate is at the apartment now. He's arranging for security, making sure the utilities are activated, ensuring everything is ready. The groceries will be delivered there within the hour. All that's missing is you and your daughter. Nia tugged on Angela's jacket. Mama, does this mean we get to sleep inside tonight? The question shattered something in Angela's chest. Her 6-year-old daughter had learned not to expect basic shelter, had learned that sleeping indoors was a privilege, not a right, had accepted a life where expired milk was a reasonable request and a warm bed was a fantasy. I don't know, baby, Angela whispered, even as she felt her resolve crumbling. Mama's trying to figure that out. Bong Cha-kang knelt down again, bringing himself to Nia's eye level. Would you like your own room, with a real bed and blankets that are clean and soft? Nia's eyes went wide. My own room? Just for me? Just for you. And your mama gets her own room too, with a kitchen where she can cook the food we bought. With a bathroom where you can take warm baths, with heat when it's cold and air conditioning when it's hot. Can I really have that? Nia asked, her voice small and hopeful. If your mama says yes. Angela felt the weight of the decision crushing down on her. Every survival instinct told her to refuse, to walk away, to stick with what she knew, even if what she knew was cold alleys and empty stomachs. Because at least in the alley, she understood the rules. At least on the streets, she knew what to expect. But Nia was looking up at her with those bright eyes full of hope. Nia, who deserved so much more than Angela had been able to give her. Nia, who was getting thinner every week, whose cough was getting worse, who needed nutrients and warmth and safety. How do I know this is real? Angela asked, hating how her voice shook. How do I know you won't change your mind tomorrow, or decide we owe you something we can't give? Bong Cha-kang reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. He opened it, revealing a key attached to a tag with an address written in neat handwriting. He held it out to her. This is the key to apartment 4C. The building is at 217 Harbor View Drive. My associate Jun Seo will meet you there. He knows you're coming. He knows you're under my protection. No one will ask you questions. No one will demand explanations. No one will threaten you. Protection, Angela repeated, the word tasting strange in her mouth. What does that mean? It means anyone who tries to harm you or your daughter will answer to me, and no one wants to answer to me. There was no pride in the statement, no boasting. Just cold fact delivered with absolute certainty. Angela stared at the key dangling from his fingers. Such a small thing. A piece of metal that could open a door to a different life. A life where Naya could be healthy, where Angela could sleep without one eye open, where they could rebuild instead of just surviving. If I take this, she said slowly, and something goes wrong, if you change your mind, or if this is some kind of trick, I need to know we can leave, that we're not trapped. You can leave any time, Bong Cha-kang said immediately. The door locks from the inside. You control who enters. If you want to walk away tomorrow or next week or next month, you take whatever you need and you go. I won't stop you. I won't follow you. I won't send people after you. You have my word. Angela looked at Nia Hall, who was watching the key with the intensity of a child who understood that this tiny object represented everything they'd been missing. Then she looked back at Bong Cha-kang, at the grief etched into his features, at the desperation in his eyes to make something right. She thought about his mother, starving in a basement. She thought about her own mother, long dead, who would have wanted better for her granddaughter. She thought about Nia's cough, getting worse every night. She thought about the winter coming, brutal and cold. And she reached out and took the key. The metal was warm from being in his pocket, solid, real. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we'll go." Bong Cha-kang's entire body seemed to relax, as if he'd been holding his breath for the past 5 minutes. He stood up, pulled out his phone again, and made one more call. "Junseo, they're coming. Have everything ready. I want the heat on, the beds made, and the security detail in place but invisible. No one scares them." He ended the call and gestured to the black car idling nearby. "My driver will take you. The address is already programmed. Junseo will meet you at the entrance." Angela clutched the key so hard it bit into her palm. She had just made a choice that would either save them or destroy them, and she wouldn't know which until it was too late to turn back. The driver, a tall Korean man with a scar running down his left cheek, opened the rear door without a word. His movements were efficient, practiced, the behavior of someone who had done this many times before. Angela clutched Nia's hand and climbed into the car, the leather seats soft beneath her. It had been so long since she'd sat in a vehicle that the simple act of closing the door felt surreal. Bong Cha-kang loaded the grocery bags into the trunk, while the driver returned to his seat. Through the tinted window, Angela watched the parking lot, half expecting police to arrive, or someone to stop them, or reality to reassert itself and remind her that good things didn't happen to people like her. The door opened again, and Bong Cha-kang slid in beside them. The space felt smaller with him there, his presence filling the car with that same intensity he'd carried in the store. He said something in Korean to the driver, who nodded and pulled out of the parking lot. Nia pressed her face against the window, watching the buildings slide past. "Mama, where are we going?" "To our new home, baby," Angela said, the words feeling strange on her tongue. "Just for a while." "A while is good," Nia said, her voice carrying that heartbreaking acceptance of temporary things. "A while is better than nothing." Bong Cha-kang's jaw tightened at those words, but he said nothing. The drive took them through familiar streets, past the library where Angela had spent countless afternoons, past the church where they'd slept in the alley, past the park where Nia played on the swings. Angela watched her old life disappear behind them, each block taking them further from what she knew, and closer to something that terrified her. Then Bong Cha-kang's phone rang. He answered in Korean, his tone clipped and professional. But as the conversation continued, Angela noticed the change in his posture, the way his spine straightened, the way his free hand clenched into a fist, the way his eyes moved to the side mirror, checking something. He ended the call and immediately made another, his voice sharper now, more urgent. Angela didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Something was wrong. Inside the store, near the refrigerated section where bottles of juice were displayed, a man had been watching the entire exchange. He wore ordinary clothes, jeans and a jacket, the kind of outfit that made him blend into any crowd. But his eyes had been sharp, calculating, missing nothing as Bong Cha-kang knelt before the child and handed over the key. Now that same man stood outside the store, phone pressed to his ear, watching the black car pull away. He spoke in Mandarin, his voice low and cold. "Joe Lei, we have movement. Bong Cha just picked up a woman and child, homeless by the look of them. He bought them enough food for a month and gave them keys to something. He's taking them somewhere now." The voice on the other end crackled with interest. "Bong Cha doesn't help homeless people. He doesn't help anyone." That's what makes this interesting. He was emotional. Actually emotional. Knelt down to talk to the kid, bought them everything in the store, called for security to be arranged somewhere. Follow them. Already on it. The man ended the call and climbed into a gray sedan parked 3 spaces down. He pulled out smoothly, keeping 2 cars between himself and Bong Cha's vehicle. Professional, patient, invisible. Inside the black car, Bong Cha-kang's third call was even more intense. He barked orders in rapid Korean, his eyes never leaving the side mirror. Angela's stomach dropped. She'd seen this before, on the streets. The sudden tension, the quick glances, the change in energy that meant danger was close. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice tight. Bong Cha-kang held up one finger, finishing his call. When he ended it, he turned to her with an expression that made her blood run cold. Controlled fury mixed with calculation. "We're being followed," he said simply. Angela twisted in her seat, looking through the rear window. The traffic behind them looked normal. Cars moving at regular speeds, nothing suspicious, nothing out of place. "I don't see anyone," she said. "You wouldn't. The man following us is a professional. He's been trained to blend in, to maintain distance, to track without being obvious." Bong Cha-king's eyes were hard now. The vulnerability from the parking lot gone completely. "He was in the store. I noticed him but thought he was just another customer. I was wrong." "Who is he?" Angela's arms wrapped around Nia instinctively, pulling her daughter close. "He works for Zhou Lei, my rival, the man who controls the other half of the city's operations." Bong Cha-kang pulled out his phone again, typing something quickly. "Zhou Lei and I have an understanding. We stay out of each other's territory, we don't interfere in each other's business, and we maintain a balance of power that keeps the peace." "What does that have to do with us?" Bong Cha-kang looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her chest constrict. Guilt. Deep, agonizing guilt. "By helping you, I've shown weakness. Zhou Lei looks for weakness the way a shark smells blood. He'll see you and your daughter as leverage, as tools he can use against me." The car made a sudden turn, the driver acting on unspoken instruction. They merged onto a different street, the buildings getting taller, cleaner, more expensive looking. But Angela barely noticed. Her mind was reeling with the realization of what she'd just done. She'd accepted help from a man whose enemies would now see her as an asset to exploit. "You should have told me," she said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "Before I got in this car, before I took that key. You should have told me that accepting your help would make us targets." "If I had told you, would you have accepted?" "No." "Exactly." Bong Cha-kang's expression was grim. "And your daughter would still be starving. You would still be sleeping in an alley, still begging for expired milk. I made a choice to help you knowing the risks. Now I'm making another choice to protect you from those risks." The phone in his hand buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went even harder. He showed it to Angela. A text message from an unknown number, written in English so she could read it. "Nice strays, Bong Cha. They are valuable now." Angela's hands started shaking. Naya looked up at her, sensing the fear, her small face creasing with worry. "Mama, are we in trouble?" "No, baby," Angela lied, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. She could see it in Bong Cha-kang's face, in the way the driver's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, in the way the car's speed increased just slightly. They were being hunted. And by accepting help from a dangerous man, she'd dragged her daughter into a war she didn't understand. Bong Cha-kang made another call, his voice like ice. "Code Red, the apartment on Harbor View. I want 6 men there within 10 minutes. Full perimeter. No one gets close without being identified. And I want the gray sedan following us boxed in and the driver detained." He ended the call and looked at Angela. "When we arrive at the apartment, you go inside immediately. Don't look around. Don't hesitate. Junseo will be waiting. He'll take you straight up. The building has security cameras on every entrance, armed guards in the lobby. No one can get to you there." "You said this would be safe," Angela said, her voice breaking. "You said we'd be protected." "You will be, but protection doesn't mean isolation from danger. It means having more power on your side than your enemies have on theirs." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. I have more power than Zhou Lei can imagine. He's testing me, trying to see if I'll back down. I won't. And by tomorrow morning, he'll understand that touching you or your daughter means starting a war he cannot win. The car turned again, and suddenly they were on a tree-lined street where elegant buildings rose on both sides, clean sidewalks, well-maintained landscaping, the kind of neighborhood where people didn't lock their doors because crime simply didn't happen here. But Angela knew better now. Crime happened everywhere. It just wore nicer clothes in neighborhoods like this. The car pulled up in front of a modern building with glass doors and a uniformed doorman. A Korean man in a dark suit stood near the entrance, his eyes scanning the street with professional alertness. That would be Jun Seo. Remember, Bong Chakang said as the car stopped. Inside immediately. Don't stop. Don't look back. But Angela did look back. Through the rear window, she saw the gray sedan pull to a stop 3 blocks away. Saw the driver watching them. Saw him raise his phone to make another call. And she understood with terrible clarity that accepting help had saved her daughter's life and simultaneously put it in more danger than ever before. The driver opened the door, and Jun Seo appeared instantly at Angela's side. He was younger than Bong Chakang, maybe in his late 20s, with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor that reminded her of security guards at banks. Except this security guard had a visible holster under his jacket. "This way," he said in lightly accented English, his tone firm but not unkind. "Quickly, please." Angela scooped Naya into her arms even though her daughter was getting too big to carry, and followed Jun Seo through the glass doors. The lobby was warm, decorated with modern furniture and soft lighting. A doorman nodded respectfully as they passed. Everything looked normal, safe, like the kind of building where families lived peaceful lives. But Angela could feel the tension radiating from Jun Seo as he guided them to the elevator, his hand hovering near his jacket, his eyes constantly scanning the entrance behind them. Bong Chakang entered the lobby 30 seconds later, speaking rapidly into his phone. He caught Angela's eye and nodded toward the elevator. "Go, 4th floor. I'll be up in 5 minutes." The elevator doors closed, sealing them in with Jun Seo. The ascent was smooth, quiet, nothing like the rattling freight elevators Angela remembered from her old factory job. Nia pressed against her mother's chest, her small heart beating fast like a trapped bird. "It's okay, baby," Angela whispered. "We're safe now." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. The elevator opened onto a clean hallway with soft carpet and warm lighting. Jun Seo led them to apartment 4C and unlocked the door with a key identical to the one Bong Chakang had given Angela. He pushed it open and stepped aside. "You're home," he said simply. Angela's breath caught. The apartment was beautiful. Not fancy or decorated like a magazine spread, but clean and functional and real. A small living room with a couch and television. A kitchen with actual appliances, a stove, a refrigerator humming softly. Sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the street below. Everything was ready, as if someone had been living here just yesterday and stepped out for a moment. But it was the bedrooms that made Nia gasp. She wriggled out of Angela's arms and ran to the first door on the left, pushing it open. Inside was a room painted soft yellow, with a twin bed covered in clean sheets and a thick comforter. A small desk sat against one wall, a lamp on the nightstand. A closet with the door open, revealing empty hangers waiting for clothes they didn't have. "Mama," Nia breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "Is this mine? Is this really mine?" Angela stepped into the doorway, her throat so tight she could barely speak. The bed was made with precision, hospital corners tucked perfectly. The pillows were plump and new. There were even curtains on the window, pale blue with white flowers. "Just for tonight, baby," Angela managed to say, though her voice cracked. "We'll see about tomorrow." But Nia wasn't listening. She'd climbed onto the bed, bouncing slightly, her face split into the widest smile Angela had seen in months. "It's so soft, Mama. Come feel. It's like sleeping on a cloud." Junseo appeared in the hallway behind them. The other bedroom is yours. Bathroom is stocked with toiletries. Kitchen has basic supplies until the groceries arrive. He paused, his expression softening slightly as he watched Nia's joy. Mr. Kang said to make sure the heat was on. It should be comfortable. When did he arrange all this? Angela asked. He only made the calls 20 minutes ago. He didn't. Junseo's answer was simple and devastating. This apartment has been ready for 3 days. He had me prepare it earlier this week. Angela felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. 3 days. Before he'd approached them in the store. Before he'd bought the groceries. Before he'd offered them safety. He'd already made the decision. Already prepared a space for them. Already committed to helping before they'd ever spoken. He was planning this, she whispered. Yes. He watched you for 3 weeks like he said. Then he told me to prepare the apartment, to make it ready for a mother and daughter who needed safety. He didn't tell me when he would bring you here, only that when he did, everything needed to be perfect. Angela walked into the living room on shaking legs. The couch was real leather, soft and welcoming. The television was modest but functional. The kitchen had dishes in the cabinets, pots and pans in the drawers, everything a person would need to make a home. This wasn't a temporary shelter. This wasn't a charity handout. This was a life, fully formed and waiting, created specifically for them. Nia appeared in the living room, still grinning, her eyes bright with an emotion Angela hadn't seen in so long she'd almost forgotten what it looked like. Hope. Pure, unfiltered, childlike hope. Mama, can I really sleep in that bed tonight? Yes, baby. And tomorrow? Angela's eyes burned. We'll see. And can we cook food in the kitchen? Real food that we make ourselves? Yes. Nia threw her arms around Angela's waist, squeezing tight. This is the best day ever, Mama. Even better than my birthday. Even better than when we went to the zoo that one time. Angela held her daughter, feeling the fragile weight of her, the 2 sharp angles of her shoulder blades, the way her ribs pressed against her thin dress, but also feeling the life in her, the joy, the resilience that had somehow survived months of hardship. Junseo's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then nodded. Understood. He looked at Angela. The groceries have arrived. I'll bring them up. He left, and Angela walked to the window, looking down at the street below. The gray sedan was gone. Several men in dark suits had positioned themselves at various points around the building. Not obvious, not threatening, just present, watchful. Bong Cha-kang had created a fortress disguised as a normal apartment building. Nia came to stand beside her, pressing her small hand against the glass. Mama, are we going to be okay? It was the question Angela had been avoiding, the question that had haunted every decision for the past 9 months. Would they be okay? Would they survive? Would Nia grow up healthy and safe? Or would the streets claim them both eventually? For the first time since losing their old life, Angela allowed herself to believe a different answer was possible. I think so, baby, she said softly. I think maybe we will be. The door opened, and Junseo returned with the first load of grocery bags. Behind him came Bong Cha-kang, carrying the rest, his expression unreadable. He placed the bags on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment, looking at Nia's face, at the joy radiating from her like sunlight. The bed is good? He asked quietly. It's perfect, Nia said, running over to him. It's the softest bed in the whole world. Thank you, mister. Something flickered across his face. Pain and peace mixed together. The look of a man watching a ghost be laid to rest. You're welcome, he said, his voice rough. You deserve soft beds and warm rooms and all the milk you want. Then his phone buzzed again, shattering the moment. He looked at the screen, and the peace drained from his expression, replaced by cold fury. He stepped into the hallway, answering in Korean, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. Angela watched him through the open door, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched into a fist. Whatever Zhou Lei wanted, whatever game he was playing, it wasn't over. But in this moment, standing in a warm apartment with her daughter smiling for the first time in months, Angela let herself feel something dangerous. Gratitude. And beneath that, the fragile, terrifying seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, they had found someone who would actually keep them safe. Even if that safety came with a price she didn't yet understand. The moment shattered exactly 2 hours later. Angela had spent those 2 hours in a daze of normalcy that felt almost painful. She'd put away the groceries with Nia's help, marveling at the full refrigerator, the stocked cabinets, the abundance that had seemed impossible just hours ago. She'd run a bath for Nia, watching her daughter's face light up at the warm water and the small bottle of bubble bath Junseo had left on the bathroom counter. She'd made sandwiches with fresh bread and real turkey, cutting them into triangles the way Nia liked, the way Angela used to do before everything fell apart. For 2 hours, she'd let herself pretend this was real, that this apartment was theirs, that they were safe, that the danger lurking outside couldn't touch them here. Then, Bong Cha-kang's phone made a sound that cut through the quiet like a gunshot. He'd been sitting in the living room, working on his phone, making calls in Korean that Angela couldn't understand, but that sounded increasingly tense. Junseo had stationed himself by the door, silent and watchful. Everything had felt controlled, secure, until that sound. Bong Cha-kang looked at his screen and the color drained from his face. His jaw clenched so hard Angela could see the muscles working beneath his skin. He stood up slowly, his entire body going rigid with the kind of fury that made the air feel dangerous. "Junseo," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Get them away from the windows. Now." Junseo moved instantly, crossing the room in 3 long strides. "Come with me, please, both of you, to the interior hallway." "What's happening?" Angela asked, but she was already moving, already pulling Nia away from the living room window where she'd been watching the street below. Bong Cha-kang turned his phone so Angela could see the screen as she passed. Another text message. Same unknown number. "Nice strays, Bong Cha. We'll be collecting them, tonight." Angela's blood turned to ice. Tonight. Not a vague threat for someday. Tonight. "Get them into the bathroom," Bong Cha-kang said to Junseo. "Interior room, no windows. Lock the door." But Angela stopped moving. The terror that had been building in her chest suddenly crystallized into something else. Rage, pure, burning rage at the situation she'd been forced into, at the choice between starving on the streets or accepting help that came with invisible strings that were now tightening around her throat. "No," she said. Bong Cha-kang's eyes snapped to her. "This is not negotiable." "You're right, it's not." Angela's voice was shaking, but not with fear anymore, with fury. "I'm leaving. Right now. I'm taking my daughter and we're walking out that door and disappearing. We're good at disappearing. We've been doing it for 9 months. You can't leave. Watch me." She grabbed Nia's hand and started toward the door, but Junseo stepped in front of it, his expression apologetic, but immovable. "Please," he said quietly. "You don't understand what you're walking into." "I understand perfectly," Angela said, her voice rising. "I understand that accepting help from him painted a target on my daughter. I understand that some man named Zhou Lei sees us as leverage. I understand that staying here makes us sitting ducks. So we're leaving." Bong Cha-kang crossed the room in 2 strides, putting himself between Angela and the door. "You walk out that door, you're dead within an hour, maybe less. Then we'll be dead in an alley instead of a nice apartment. At least we're used to alleys." "Mama," Nia whispered, tugging on her mother's hand. "I'm scared." The fear in her daughter's voice cut through Angela's rage. leaving only the cold reality underneath. She looked at Bong Cha-kang, really looked at him, and saw something in his expression that made her stomach drop. He was scared too. Not for himself, for them. "Tell me the truth," Angela said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "All of it. Right now." Bong Cha-kang's phone rang. He answered, listened for 10 seconds, and his face went even harder. He spoke in rapid Korean, his tone commanding, then ended the call. "My security team," he said, looking at Angela with eyes that had gone cold and calculating. 3 men on the south entrance, 2 on the north, 1 in the lobby, all positioned to prevent anyone from entering this building. "That sounds good," Angela said, though her voice was uncertain. "They just reported movement, multiple vehicles. Joe Lay's men are surrounding the building. My team counts at least 15 hostiles, probably more. They're not here to negotiate." Angela felt the world tilt. 15 men. Armed, dangerous men who worked for someone powerful enough to challenge Bong Cha-kang. Men who wanted to take her and Nia as leverage. "Then call the police," she said desperately. "Call 911. This is attempted kidnapping. Let the cops handle it." "The police won't come." Bong Cha-kang's voice was flat, stating a fact. "Joe Lay has half the department on his payroll. Any call we make will be ignored or redirected. We're on our own." Junseo's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went pale. He spoke in Korean to Bong Cha-kang, and whatever he said made the older man's hands curl into fists. "What?" Angela demanded. "What did he say?" Bong Cha-kang met her eyes. "My men in the lobby just reported that Joe Lay himself is here. He's walking toward the entrance with 10 armed guards. He's not hiding. He's not being subtle. He's making a statement." "What kind of statement?" "That I'm weak. That showing compassion was a mistake. That anyone I care about is a tool he can use against me." His voice was tight with controlled rage. "He's telling me to choose between keeping you safe and maintaining my power in this city." Angela's knees felt weak. She sank onto the couch, pulling Nia close. "You should have let us leave when we wanted to. Before any of this started. You should have just given us the groceries and walked away." "If I had walked away, you'd still be starving. Nia would still be sick. And in 2 months, maybe 3, I'd read about a homeless woman and her daughter found frozen in an alley during winter, say." "That was the alternative." "At least it would have been our choice," Angela said, tears burning in her eyes. "At least we would have died on our own terms, not because we became pawns in someone else's war." Bong Cha-kang knelt in front of her, bringing himself to eye level the same way he had in the store. But this time there was no gentleness in his expression, only hard, cold determination. "You're not going to die. Neither is your daughter. Joe Lay thinks I'll surrender you to avoid a war. He thinks I'll calculate the cost and decide you're not worth it. He's wrong." "How many people are going to die because you decided to help us?" Angela asked, her voice breaking. "How much blood will be on my hands because I was desperate enough to accept your offer?" "None of that is your fault. None of it. The only person responsible for what happens tonight is Joe Lay for believing that kindness is weakness and that human lives are bargaining chips." Junseo spoke urgently in Korean. Bong Cha-kang stood up, pulling out his phone. "What's happening?" Angela demanded. "Joe Lay just entered the lobby. He's asking the doorman which apartment you're in." Bong Cha-kang's voice was ice. "We're out of time." He made a call, speaking rapidly, his tone carrying absolute authority. When he finished, he looked at Junseo and said something in Korean that made the younger man's eyes go wide. "Code red?" Junseo asked in English, as if confirming he'd heard correctly. "Code red," Bong Cha-kang confirmed. "Full authorization. No restrictions." Junseo nodded and left the apartment, moving fast. Angela stood up, her heart hammering. "What does Code Red mean?" It means I just authorized my men to use lethal force to protect this location. It means anyone who tries to enter this apartment without my permission will be stopped by any means necessary. It means this stops being a standoff and becomes a war. You're going to start a gang war over us? Over two homeless people you don't even know? Bong Cha-kang looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the same grief she'd seen in the parking lot, the same pain that had driven him to help them in the first place. I watched my mother die because no one was powerful enough to protect her. I became powerful specifically so I would never be helpless again, so I could protect people who needed it. You think I'll surrender that power now, Mom? You think I'll let Zhou Lei take you and your daughter just to prove a point about weakness? He shook his head. He chose the wrong people to threaten, and he's about to learn exactly how far I'm willing to go to keep my word. His phone rang again. He answered, listened, and his expression went deadly calm. He's in the elevator, Bong Cha-kang said quietly, coming to this floor. He has 6 men with him. Angela clutched Nia so tightly her daughter whimpered. What do we do? Bong Cha-kang walked to the door and stood there, waiting. We show him that some lines should never be crossed. The elevator chimed softly in the hallway. Angela heard it through the apartment door, that innocent sound that meant danger had arrived. Footsteps followed, multiple sets, moving with purpose down the carpeted hallway. Heavy footsteps. Men who were used to walking into places they didn't belong and taking what they wanted. Bong Cha-kang stood motionless at the door, his hand resting near his jacket, where Angela knew he kept a weapon. His breathing was controlled, steady, the calm before violence. Take Nia into the bedroom, he said without turning around. The one in the back. Close the door. Get under the bed or in the closet. Stay there until I come for you. I'm not hiding, Angela said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. This is not the time for pride. This isn't about pride. This is about my daughter. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Angela could see shadows moving in the gap beneath it, blocking the light from the hallway. Multiple men, waiting. Then came the knock, soft, almost polite. The kind of knock a neighbor might make when borrowing sugar. But Angela heard the threat beneath it, the promise of violence wrapped in false civility. A voice spoke from the other side, deep, accented, carrying authority. Bong Cha-kang, we should talk, like civilized men. Bong Cha-kang didn't move. Zhou Lei, you're far from your territory. Territory is flexible, especially when something valuable crosses into neutral ground. There's nothing here that belongs to you. A pause. Then laughter, cold and calculating. That homeless woman and her child? You're claiming them? The great Bong Cha-kang, protector of street trash? Angela felt something crack inside her chest. Not fear, not anymore. Something hotter, angrier. Bong Cha-kang's voice was ice. Choose your next words carefully. I choose them perfectly. You made a mistake today, old friend. You showed weakness. You revealed that you care about something other than power and money. That woman and her daughter are leverage now, tools I can use, and I will use them unless you step aside and let me take what's mine. They're not yours. Everything is mine if I want it badly enough, and I want that child specifically. The words hung in the air like poison. Angela's arms tightened around Nia, whose small body had gone rigid with fear. Why the child? Bong Cha-kang asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Because taking her breaks you without killing you. Because a man who loses someone he's trying to protect suffers more than a man who simply dies. Because I want you to understand that compassion is a luxury you can't afford in our world. Angela felt her daughter trembling against her, felt the weight of every decision that had led them to this moment. The factory closing, the eviction, the months on the streets, the desperate request for expired milk that had triggered all of this. And she felt something else rising inside her, something primal and fierce that had been buried under layers of exhaustion and defeat. The same instinct that had kept her alive through 9 months of homelessness. The same strength that had made her wake up every morning and keep fighting when giving up would have been easier. She was a mother, and mothers didn't surrender their children. "Nia," she whispered, kneeling down so they were face to face. "I need you to do exactly what I say. Go into the bedroom, get under the bed. Don't come out until I come get you. Do you understand?" "Mama, I'm scared." "I know, baby. But I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that?" Nia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Angela kissed her forehead, smoothing her hair one last time, then watched her daughter run to the bedroom and disappear inside. The door closed with a soft click. Angela stood up and walked to stand beside Bong Chakang. He glanced at her, surprised, but she kept her eyes on the door. "Open it," she said. "No." "Open the door. I want to see the man who thinks he can take my daughter." "Angela, you don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly. I understand that Jolei thinks I'm weak because I'm homeless, because I begged for expired milk, because I accepted help from you. He thinks I'm a victim who'll surrender when threatened." Her voice was steady now, cold and hard as steel. "He's wrong." Bong Chakang studied her face, seeing something there that made him pause. Then he reached over and unlocked the door. Didn't open it, just unlocked it. Jolei pushed it open himself. He was shorter than Angela expected, maybe 5 feet 8 inches, but built like a boxer. His face was scarred on the left side, old burn marks that twisted his features into a permanent sneer. 6 men flanked him, all armed, all watching Bong Chakang with the alertness of predators. Jolei's eyes moved past Bong Chakang and settled on Angela. He smiled, and it was the cruelest expression she'd ever seen. "So, this is the woman worth starting a war over. She doesn't look like much." Angela met his gaze without flinching. "And you don't look like someone smart enough to walk away while you still can." Jolei's smile widened. Brave words from a homeless beggar. "Where's the child?" "Hiding?" "Somewhere you'll never reach her." "We'll see about that. I have 6 men. Bongcha has himself and 1 guard. Simple mathematics." Angela took a step forward, placing herself between Jolei and the bedroom where Nia was hiding. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. Her voice didn't waver. "You want my daughter? Then you come through me first, and I promise you this." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with a ferocity that came from 9 months of surviving impossible odds. "Over my dead body." The words hung in the air between them. Jolei's smile faltered for just a moment, replaced by something that might have been respect or calculation. With men like him, the two were often the same thing. "That can be arranged," he said quietly. Then he nodded to his men. "Take her." 2 of Jolei's guards stepped forward, reaching for Angela. But before their hands could touch her, Bong Chakang moved. He didn't shout, didn't announce his intention. He simply stepped between Angela and the guards, his movement so fast and controlled that for a second no one reacted. Then his fist connected with the first guard's jaw with a crack that echoed through the apartment. The guard dropped like a stone. The second guard reached for his weapon, but Bong Chakang caught his wrist and twisted. The sound of breaking bone made Angela's stomach turn. The guard screamed, stumbling backward into the hallway. Jolei's remaining 4 guards drew their weapons simultaneously. 4 handguns, all pointed at Bong Chakang's chest. The apartment door slammed shut. Junseok had appeared from somewhere, moving with silent efficiency. He stood beside Bong Chakang now, his own weapon drawn, creating a barrier between Jolei's men and the apartment. "Stand down," Jolei said calmly, as if violence hadn't just erupted in front of him. "All of you. This isn't how this ends." "Then how does it end?" Bong Chakang asked, his voice steady despite the 4 guns aimed at him. "You leave now, or you start a war you can't win. Can't I? Zhou Lei's eyes were cold. I have 4 guns on you. You have 1. Your guard outside is surrounded by my men. This building is mine tonight. You're wrong about the numbers. Bong Cha-kang pulled out his phone, pressed a button, and held it up so Zhou Lei could see the screen. It showed security camera footage, the building's lobby, the street outside. Every angle revealed the same thing. Zhou Lei's men, surrounded by Bong Cha-kang's forces, outnumbered 2-1. Trapped. Zhou Lei's expression didn't change, but Angela saw the tension in his shoulders, the calculation happening behind his eyes. You planned this, Zhou Lei said. The moment you sent that first text, I knew you'd come. I've been preparing for 3 hours. Every exit is covered. Every entrance is blocked. Your men can't leave without my permission. And if anything happens to me, to Angela, or to her daughter, my people have orders to eliminate everyone in your crew. No survivors. No negotiations. The hallway had gone very quiet. Zhou Lei's guards looked at each other, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. Being outnumbered changed calculations, changed willingness to die for a boss's ego. Zhou Lei studied Bong Cha-kang's face for a long moment. Then he laughed. Actually laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. You'd start a war over a homeless woman and her child. I didn't think you were capable of that kind of stupidity. Call it what you want. The outcome is the same. You leave now, or none of your men leave alive. Angela watched the standoff, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. This was her fault. All of this. Men with guns standing in an apartment hallway because she'd been desperate enough to ask for expired milk. Zhou Lei's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went harder. He spoke in rapid Mandarin, his tone sharp with anger. When he ended the call, he looked at Bong Cha-kang with something that might have been grudging respect. Your men just took out my south perimeter, 6 of my best soldiers, disarmed and detained in under 2 minutes. I told you. I was prepared. Zhou Lei looked past him to Angela, studying her with those cold, calculating eyes. This woman must be special to make you take risks like this. She reminds me that power without purpose is meaningless. Power without purpose is just power, which is all that matters. But even as Zhou Lei said it, he was backing toward the elevator, his men following. This isn't over, Bong Cha. You've made your choice. Now live with the consequences. I intend to. Zhou Lei and his men disappeared into the elevator. The doors closed. The hallway was suddenly empty except for Bong Cha-kang and Jun Seo. Angela's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and fear and relief so intense it felt like drowning. Bong Cha-kang knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder, steadying her. It's over, he said quietly. He won't come back tonight. But he will come back. Eventually, but by then, you'll be ready. Angela looked up at him, not understanding. Ready for what? Bong Cha-kang stood, walked to a cabinet in the living room and opened it. Inside was a small case. He pulled it out, placed it on the coffee table, and opened it. A handgun. Small, compact, black metal gleaming under the apartment lights. No, Angela said immediately. No, I can't. You just told Zhou Lei he'd have to go through you to reach Nia. Did you mean it? Yes, but I didn't mean with a gun. I've never held a gun in my life. Then it's time you learned. Bong Cha-kang picked up the weapon, checked it with practiced efficiency, and held it out to her. Zhou Lei is gone for now, but he's calculating his next move. Planning how to get past my security, how to reach you when I'm not here. You need to be able to protect yourself and your daughter. Angela stared at the gun like it was a snake. I can't shoot someone. You can if they're trying to take Nia. Trust me. When that moment comes, you'll find the strength. He pressed the weapon into her hands. The metal was cold, heavier than she expected, solid and real and terrifying. "This is insane," she whispered. "This is survival. Now pay attention. I'm going to teach you how to use this properly. Because the next time Joe comes, I might not be here to stop him." The training lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes of Bong Cha-kang showing Angela how to hold the weapon properly, how to aim, how to breathe and squeeze the trigger instead of pulling, how to check if it was loaded, how to engage and disengage the safety. 20 minutes that felt like both an eternity and not nearly enough time. Angela's hands shook the entire time. The weight of the gun felt wrong, foreign. But she forced herself to memorize every instruction, every detail, because Nia was sleeping in the bedroom just 30 feet away, and Angela would burn the world down before she let anyone take her. "Keep it in the nightstand," Bong Cha-kang said, his voice steady and patient. "Safety on, but know where it is. Know you can reach it in 3 seconds if you need to." "I hope I never need to." "So do I." He was putting the weapon back in its case when his phone rang again. He answered, listened, and his expression shifted from tense to relieved. "Joe just left the area. All his vehicles are heading back toward his territory. My men are maintaining position but standing down from code red." He looked at Angela. "It's over, for tonight." But it wasn't over. Not really. Because 3 nights later, at 2:30 in the morning, Angela woke to the sound of breaking glass. She was on her feet instantly, adrenaline flooding her system. The sound had come from the living room. Someone had broken the window. The 4th-floor window that was supposed to be impossible to reach. Angela ran to Nia's room, scooped her sleeping daughter up, and did exactly what Bong Cha-kang had taught her. She put Nia in the closet, under the hanging clothes, buried in blankets. "Stay here. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." Then she grabbed the gun from her nightstand and moved into the hallway. The apartment was dark except for streetlight filtering through the broken window. She could see shapes moving in the living room. 2 men, maybe 3. They were being quiet, professional, moving with the precision of people who'd done this before. One of them spoke in Mandarin. She recognized the language even if she couldn't understand the words. Joe Lay's men. They'd found a way past Bong Cha-kang's security. Angela's heart hammered so hard she thought they'd hear it. Her hands were shaking. The gun felt impossibly heavy. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to run, to surrender. But Nia was in that closet, 30 feet away, helpless. Angela stepped into the living room, raised the gun the way Bong Cha-kang had taught her, and spoke with a steadiness that surprised her. "Get out, now!" The men froze. One of them laughed, started to say something. Angela pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The shot went wide, missing completely, hitting the wall behind them. But it didn't matter. Because suddenly, the apartment door crashed open and Junseo burst through with 3 other guards, weapons drawn. The fight lasted less than a minute. Joe Lay's men were outnumbered and trapped. They surrendered quickly, dropping their weapons, raising their hands. Junseo secured them while making rapid calls on his phone. Within 5 minutes, the apartment was full of people. Bong Cha-kang arrived at 2:45 a.m., his face carved from stone, fury radiating from every line of his body. He looked at the broken window, at the captured men, at Angela standing there with the gun still in her hands, her entire body shaking now that the danger had passed. "You fired," he said quietly. "I had to protect her." "You fired to protect your daughter." Something in his voice cracked. "Just like my mother would have if she'd had the chance." Angela's legs gave out. She sank onto the couch, the gun falling from her fingers. Junseo took it carefully, made it safe. Bong Cha-kang knelt in front of her. Joe Lay crossed the line. He sent men into a protected home to take a child. That's a declaration of war he can't walk back from. What happens now? Now? Bong Cha-kang's expression was grim. Now I finish this. Permanently. The war that followed lasted 2 weeks. Angela didn't see most of it. She stayed in the apartment with Nia, guards stationed at every entrance, while Bong Cha-kang systematically dismantled Zhou Lei's operation. She heard about it later, how Zhou Lei had been forced to flee the city, how his territory had been absorbed, how the threat had been eliminated. 3 months later, Angela stood in the apartment kitchen making breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs and toast and fresh orange juice. Nia sat at the table, healthy now, her cough gone, her cheeks full, reading a book from the library. The apartment was theirs. Truly theirs. Bong Cha-kang had transferred the deed into Angela's name, had helped her find a job at a community center, had become a permanent fixture in their lives, stopping by twice a week to check on them, to have dinner, to watch Nia grow stronger. He'd found his redemption, had channeled 20 years of guilt and power into protecting two people who'd had nothing, had proven that compassion wasn't weakness, but the ultimate expression of strength. Angela poured milk for Nia. Fresh milk, the expensive kind. And she thought about the day they'd walked into that store, desperate and starving, and how one man's grief had collided with their need and changed all three of their lives forever. "Mama," Nia said, looking up from her book. "Mr. Kang is coming for dinner tonight, right?" "Yes, baby." "Good. I made him a drawing." Angela smiled, carrying the glass of milk to her daughter. Outside the window, the city stretched endlessly, full of danger and possibility. But in this apartment, they were safe, they were home, and they would never be hungry again. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere and click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.